Good afternoon. My name is Mark Carroll with the Focused Ultrasound Foundation, and I will be the moderator for today's panel on credentialing and certification. We've talked in the past at the symposium about the importance of proper training to make sure that technology is used properly, effectively, and safely. Today, we're going to talk about certification and credentialing. Certification is the action or process of providing someone with an official document attesting to the status or level of achievement, and this is usually in conjunction with the manufacturer of technology. Credentialing is the process of establishing the qualifications of licensed medical professionals and assessing their background and legitimacy to practice a specific intervention. This is usually issued by the facility in which the procedure is performed. Today, we have a group of distinguished professionals responsible at their respective companies for ensuring competency among their users, who will talk to you about the processes and requirements they have put in place as part of their training programs for clinicians and support staff. Karen Cornett is Vice President of Clinical Operations at Sonicare Medical. She joined Sonicare in 2010 as a clinical nurse specialist, providing concierge nursing care to patients traveling outside the United States for focused ultrasound ablation of prostate cancer. Since FDA clearance of Sonoblate in October 2015, Karen has been instrumental in its commercialization in the US. Mithal Burtnik is Vice President of Clinical Affairs at Profound Medical. He has over 15 years experience creating and developing image-guided therapeutic ultrasound solutions from benchtop to bedside, and is the inventor of the closed-loop temperature feedback control algorithm used by the Tulsa Pro system. At Profound, he has led the scientific design and execution of preclinical and clinical studies for Tulsa Pro. Hugo Embert is Chief Marketing Officer at the uwTMS Group. He leads the company's strategy in marketing and communication, product management, application, and clinical affairs. Based currently in the company's US subsidiary in Austin, Texas, he also leads directly all marketing and reimbursement efforts for the uwTMS Group in the US. Amit Sokolov is Vice President of Clinical R&D and Program Management at Insidetech. He manages the global applications team responsible for clinical training and treatment support for commercial and research sites, and is responsible for the product development from a clinical point of view. Amit holds a BSc in Biomedical Engineering from the Technion Israeli Institute of Technology and an MSc in Biostatistics from Tel Aviv University.
Hello, I'm Karen Cornett, Vice President of Clinical Operations at Sonicare Medical. We are grateful for this opportunity to share the building blocks of our successful physician training program with the friends and supporters of the Focused Ultrasound Foundation. Our training program utilizes a multi-pronged approach, which includes online training modules, live case observation, simulator sessions, in-person proctored case support, followed by remote online case support. To begin the training process, physicians will view 4 prerequisite presentations on the Sonicare training portal, which cover HIFU theory, patient selection, clinical considerations, and a basic overview of the Sonoblate software interface. Besides the 4 prerequisite presentations, there are numerous other advanced HIFU technique presentations at their disposal. Physicians have an on-demand access to the Sonicare Medical online training portal for refresher training as well as other topics. Included in the portal's library are several key opinion leaders sharing their Sonoblate HIFU experience. The live case observation is an opportunity for the training physician to observe an experienced Sonoblate physician. During live case observation, there is a free exchange between proctor and trainee on a number of topics, from HIFU theory and patient selection to best practice techniques, post-HIFU patient care, and patient outcomes. After completing the prerequisite online presentations, the physician is scheduled for an interactive online simulator session with one of the Sonicare Medical technical proctor team members. During the simulator session, the physician has control of the software and is guided through the steps of a virtual HIFU procedure, highlighting the software navigation, ablation techniques, and patient safety concerns. The simulator sessions are tailored to the physician's choice of ablation plans: whole gland, hemi, and focal, including various focal fusion platforms. Physicians are welcomed and encouraged to engage us for simulator refresher sessions if needed. Refresher simulator sessions are a great option for the new and intermediate HIFU users. Upon completion of the pre-case training path and the physician has scheduled a case, a technical proctor team member will join the physician in person for his or her first 5 cases. This allows the physician to become acquainted and comfortable with all the aspects of the HIFU procedure while honing their skills and building their confidence. After 5 cases of in-person support, Sonicare Medical offers physicians remote online support via ProctorLink. ProctorLink utilizes a HIPAA-compliant online screen sharing platform that allows a remote Sonicare technical proctor team member to visualize the same Sonoblate screen the physician utilizes for planning and delivery of the HIFU. The physician may interact with the technical proctor and seek assistance as needed. Many current physicians utilize and appreciate the added support of a second set of eyes provided by the ProctorLink online support team. Sonicare Medical also offers further educational opportunities, such as additional online training modules covering advanced prostate HIFU techniques. We also offer an annual user group meeting where Sonoblate HIFU physicians come together to share their HIFU experiences and engage in collaborative discussion that advances everyone's knowledge. In summary, the Sonicare Medical Training and Certification Program is easy to use and has resources available for beginner to experienced users. With the online training modules, live case observation, simulation sessions, in-person and remote support, Sonicare Medical prepares physicians to be comfortable and competent in utilizing Sonoblate HIFU technology. Thank you to the Focused Ultrasound Symposium organizers and to you, the attendees, for this opportunity, as well as your time and attention.
Hello, everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to discuss with you today on the topic of credentialing and certification. I represent uwTMS. For those who do not know us, we are, amongst other things, the developers, manufacturers, and distributors of HIFU devices that are cleared in the US for the ablation of prostate tissue and in other parts of the world for the treatment of prostate cancer. For the devices Abatherm and Focal One, we have developed and fine-tuned along the years a complete training program to ensure that the staff who will use or interact with our device are trained properly and are satisfied with the clinical results. This program is divided in 3 major steps. The first one allows them to learn the basis of HIFU and its application to the prostate. In the second step, the trainee will start performing actual procedures on their own patients and finalize the training. In the first steps, this is when they become a licensed user. As I said earlier, the first phase is a general introduction on high-intensity focused ultrasound, the Focal One device and its application to the prostate. That first step can be performed in person, in which case the trainee will travel to an expert site. This is, of course, the preferred option, since it initiates this precious peer-to-peer conversations between urologists. Alternatively, the training can also go through a complete e-learning program divided in several modules, so he does not have to do everything at the same time. Finally, in this special COVID times, we've also started to perform phase 1 training and case observations via Zoom or other live broadcasting system, so the trainees can see what's going on in the OR and interact with the expert in real time while they perform the procedure. At the end of the first phase, the trainee is basically able to discuss with patients about the HIFU procedure and start recruiting his first patients and scheduling the cases. The second phase of the training is where the urologist will treat his first patients. For that, we will fly a proctor. A proctor for us is a urologist who has already performed a large number of HIFU procedures, typically 30 or more, and has been certified by our application specialist as a proctor. So as I said, the proctor will fly to the trainee's OR and start treating the first patients. This is really a key step of the training. For the next few sessions, one of our certified application specialists will be in the operating room along with the team. He or she will work with the OR staff to set up the Focal One device, work on the single-use consumable, also work with the SPD teams on the probe disinfection and handling, the installation of the patient, the clinical application, and of course work with the urologist on the operation of the device during the whole procedure. Typically, this phase 3 lasts another 5 to 10 cases. At the end of this third phase, the trained urologist is presented with his user license. Typically, our application specialist will revisit the site after 6 months to make sure that the training was efficient and that the urologist is still comfortable with the device and the clinical results he gets with it. After 30 cases, the user is becoming eligible to become a proctor if he wants to, and if our application specialists confirm that he is able to. Thank you very much. I hope that was clear, and I'm open to any questions.
Hello, my name is Amit Sokolov. I'm a VP Clinical R&D at Insidetech, and I will share with you our training program while referring specifically to credentialing and certification. So Insidetech products are very complex. They incorporate focused ultrasound system and MRI guidance and require deep understanding of the physics principles and the operation mechanism. In the USA, several systems and indications are approved. Specifically the neuro system for essential tremor and tremor-dominant Parkinson's disease, and the body system for uterine fibroids and bone mass palliation. Insidetech training is done on-site by application specialists. It is a risk-based control program which was approved as part of the PMA process, and it is based on experience with participation in thousands of treatments and training hundreds of physicians. The training program consists of several stages, but before we start the training, and the treating team is required to fulfill several prerequisites to ensure they have the clinical skills required to safely and effectively perform treatments. Specifically, they need to be certified in use of MR scanners and medical assessment of MR images. They need to be certified in patient management, for example, the use of stereotactic head frame, giving conscious sedation, and so on, and certified in the relevant medical fields, in case of movement disorder and neurosurgery. Certification should be according to the institution's requirements and in compliance with the applicable laws and regulations. And Insidetech does not perform credentialing to establish this qualification. Next, the training starts with theoretical and hands-on session. These are aimed to give the basic understanding of system operation. Specifically, theoretical training in a classroom, for example, the MR-guided focused ultrasound physics, the main features of the system, clinical experience, inclusion and exclusion criteria, and the safety profile from the labeling. A hands-on session using a phantom to practice system operation and treatment simulation. Dry run to walk through the roles and responsibilities of the treating team during a treatment. And a planning session to define the treatment plan using MR and CT images of the patient. Next, we start with treatment proctoring. This is aimed to ensure safe and effective system operation. Specifically, it covers the entire procedure from the beginning, when patient preparations are done and the patient positioning on the table, and throughout the treatment stages and post-treatment imaging. During treatments, the team is evaluated using a grading form for the critical tasks. You can see in this example, this is a grading form. It includes 12 critical tasks that the team is evaluated on. Each task is graded on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 means require full support by the application specialist, and 5 means that the team has performed the task independently in a safe and effective way. In the beginning of the training, most grades are around 1, 2, 3, and as the training advances, grades are becoming higher. At some point, the grades are continuously and consistently high, and the training can be completed. The team will get a certificate with the full names of all members. This looks like this. The technical training certificate signifying their formal training is complete. Last point, before I finish, I wanted to share with you some changes we have done to our training program in the COVID-19 era. Due to the restrictions, we cannot always have an on-site application specialist. So we developed the training program by remote. The program is FDA and CE approved, and it requires additional prerequisites from the treating team, and of course, a high-speed remote connection to the system workstation. Communication is done through calls and cameras. And you can see here in the photo how it looks from our end, from the supporter end. We successfully initiated like these 2 sites from the beginning in Europe, and we continuously treat more than 20 sites that already started the training by remote. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you to the Focus Ultrasound Foundation organizers for allowing me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you today on training and credentialing. And I apologize, I don't have a recorded presentation prepared for you. So I'll try to keep this brief. So we at Profound Medical, we are commercializing the Tulsa Pro MRI-guided transurethral ultrasound ablation technology in the US, and as such have created a significant training program around that effort, because we all know that marrying the concepts of MRI thermometry, real-time feedback with ultrasound ablation sort of has some technical complexities, and we often label it as a disruptive technology because it disrupts the way we treat patients, but we're also disrupting the way physicians are treating these patients, the types of collaborations that the physicians have to create amongst themselves. And for example, in our case, having the urologist sort of leave the operating theater and really work within an MRI environment, so new environment and also new sort of staff, support staff. So to that end, we've created what we branded as the Profound Genius services, where the goal here is to really create dedicated scientific team committed to establishing a successful TULSA practice. And so at the end of the day, we're interested, of course, in having our product installed at sites and the widespread use of our product, but we really want to focus on not just placing a product, but actually having the product utilized, establishing at the end of the day a successful TULSA-PRO practice. And so throughout that effort, the Profound Genius services will create intimate relationships with the site staff, and we will create a priori efficiency targets, and we'll use quantitative methodologies to reach those goals. Some of these goals include treatment workflow efficiency capacity. So basically a 2-hour procedure time is the goal. Also enabling us to treat 4 patients in a day. So we obviously recognize that, we want to minimize treatment time, run the workflow as efficiently as possible, but we also want to make sure that we have a holistic view of what goes on in an entire day. And so that can also include not just the procedure itself, but for example, the patient turnover from one to the other, especially as we have patients under anesthesia in the MRI, that turnover time can certainly become a big factor in that day. So very early on in the process with our physicians, we established these a priori quantitative targets, and we use learning theory as well as advanced analytics to measure and benchmark workflow efficiencies against some of our expert user sites, and we're able to narrow down on specific bottlenecks and specific issues that need to be improved. Secondly, the Profound Genius services really work with the physicians to establish a breadth and depth of TULSA patients that would be suitable for treatment. And so all of this really gets summed up in 3 core areas. The first really is patient experience. So reviewing, through a multi-departmental approach, reviewing patient suitability and inclusion-exclusion criteria for the procedure. Product mastery, of course, so making sure the MRI technologists are trained to be expert users of the product. And last but not least, this workflow optimization with data analytics that we use to really optimize treatment time. Our training program as a whole follows a fairly standard approach used by many other companies that spoke today. So basically some prerequisites that get accomplished prior to doing the on-site training, and then of course some mock patient treatments through to support of real patient treatments. Before closing, I'll just touch on the concept of credentialing, because I think this is an area that is very interesting and needs to be developed further together as a field. And just to give you a sense, as a device manufacturer, it's very clear all the way through to sort of FDA regulation that we are to train our users on, the safe and effective use of our product, but we are not to necessarily consult on the practice of medicine, how the physicians are going to use it in their practice. And so I think at the end of the day, creating a group, a society that can provide some level of credentialing for users in the field, especially as this field is increasing in size and indications, to go through everything from MR basics, ultrasound basics, all the way through to some of these medical considerations that physicians often have to think about that are not necessarily specific to a certain product, but to the field as a whole. And so with that, thank you for your attention. I'll close with that and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for those wonderful presentations. I want to get right into the questions. First one I have is, your presentations talked almost referentially about the United States. How do your programs vary from country to country, or do they vary from country to country, especially for those of you with installations in Asia? Amit, why don't you start?
So yeah, indeed, the program itself, the basic of that, the prerequisite and the training presentation are similar, but of course we translate them to the local languages, especially if we are talking about Asia and also Europe. the training is done by local application specialists that speak the language, that have the similar culture to the local hospitals. And it is adjusted also by regulatory requirements, because from time to time, we have different approvals in different locations around the world. But the basic, I think, in terms of the certification process and the grading form is similar throughout the world.
Hugo?
Yeah, same thing. We try to have a very similar program throughout the world. Since we started in Europe, our training program is based on the European experience, and the adaptation to the US has been FDA cleared. So there's not much we can do now apart from very slight adaptations. The trick is really in other countries like in Southeast Asia, where we have a smaller install base, and every installation is more challenging, especially right now, to have proctors flying in, and we might not have proctors available locally. So we try to adapt with newer techniques and newer tools.
Karen?
Same answer. We also try to have consistent programs throughout the world. We too try to translate into the native language of where we are. COVID has presented a bit of an issue, as I'm sure it has for everyone on this panel. And we're all just learning and adapting, but our program remains consistent throughout the world, whatever country we're in.
And Mateo, I know that you're the newest technology on the block, but have you seen any issues with transporting your model to other regions of the world?
So similar to the other panelists, we definitely aim to achieve a standardized training and onboarding process across all of our sites internationally. A lot of the effort was initially focused in the US market as we sort of went live through our commercialization last year, and we're basically sort of maybe a bit opposite to what Hugo described. We're now trying to sort of move that forward out to the other countries. Like everybody else has stated, there's language requirements. And then the last thing I'll touch on is, COVID has certainly posed issues, like everyone is aware of, and certainly concepts such like, remote support, remote, proctoring has certainly made us grow up quickly and adopt some of these opportunities. And so far, it's been actually quite successful. So I think sort of silver lining through all this, it has really helped us to standardize those programs internationally, because we don't have proctors based in every country, as I believe Hugo mentioned.
I want to focus on two of the areas that some of you mentioned, COVID and remote access. Several of you have mentioned generically that COVID has caused issues in terms of your training programs. Who would like to chime in on what the specific impacts of COVID have been? And I think perhaps most importantly, what have you learned from COVID adjustments that may benefit your credentialing, certification, and training programs as you move forward post-COVID? Karen, you want to start?
Sure. I think, one way that it has definitely affected us is even if we're not flying proctors around, our own staff are not able to fly around without having these 2-week quarantines, which makes it difficult because they're, on site for much longer than they anticipated or needed. And then when they get back, they're having to quarantine as well. It's a bit of a hurdle, but, we have remote training available. We have, as part of our program, the Sonalink available as well. So that has really enabled us to do quite a bit of training, not just with physicians, but also with staff members. So they can, use the same device to do any type of service or setup, or we can practice all kinds of things, buttonology, anything that we want to do using this remote access. So I do think in that sense, we were a little bit ahead of the game. We never anticipated having to use this quite the way and extensively as we have, but it's been nice to have that option.
Any other COVID-related changes in your programs that you think will bear fruit for the future? I'm sorry. To the other panelists. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I can address that. I think we're going to try to use in the future, even when COVID is part of the past. I think we'll try to leverage everything we've developed, all the tips and tricks we've developed to take some of the phases online, if I can say it this way. Having said that, back to what Karen said, we implemented a lot of remote access and remote observation tools, but it ended up being tricky in some of the larger institutions where going through the firewalls, getting connected to their network has been very, very challenging in some of the larger institutions and showed sometimes impossible.
Yeah, Amit, your organization probably has the largest reach of any of the companies on the panel. What have you seen from a cybersecurity point of view as you adapt your models and your technological ability to remote in to your equipment and to the people using your equipment, but the barriers that may exist, such as Hugo was describing within the academic institutions in the United States? I assume there are governmental barriers that exist around the world.
Right, so a lot of time, it takes a lot of time to connect our remote system to sites because you have to prove to the local ITs that you are doing everything according to their specific rules, and sometimes it differs between the different sites and the different countries. And we have, unfortunately, a relatively large amount of customers that we cannot even connect to the remote at all. For example, in China, this is the biggest problem from our side. We kind of trying all kinds of overcome this, and I think this is going to be the main challenge in the future. If we are referring also to the COVID issue, if you have connection, good connection, and if you have a camera, and if you can talk freely with this person, relatively possible to do the training. We are compromising the interpersonal relations that I think everyone talked about. But this is also a major challenge.
Matu, your company has, again, newest to the market and have therefore perhaps had more of a luxury of developing your approach to training, credentialing, certification in a COVID world rather than Insidetech or EDAP or Sonicare, where they've been around for a number of years and had to adapt programs that already existed. So how do you think COVID has impacted your thought process from the start in terms of developing these programs?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the concept of remote support was probably more at the forefront of our thinking, through the timing with which we came to market compared to some of the other companies on the panel. So that's something that's always been at the forefront of our thinking. So kind of when the timing came with COVID, we were to a certain extent ready to deal with it. I definitely don't want to minimize the number of hoops and hurdles you have to go through to enable some of these connections to happen, with all the rules and regulations that are in place, which are of course important. But if you can sort of think about that initially in your design and not to say that it's not a lot of work, but if you can recognize those steps and basically include it as part of your project plan from day one, it certainly helps, from a risk mitigation perspective to minimize unpleasant surprises in the future. And to sort of go back to one of your previous questions, to a certain degree, it has really been, on one hand, of course, there's challenges, and I think that interpersonal relationship, has, been affected on a day-to-day basis, but there is a big silver lining to it. And just to give you an example, when you have sort of physician to physician case observations, for example, the whole procedure is done with the patient in the MRI. And some MRI suites can be quite large, but other MRI suites can be very limited in terms of space. And so even just the basics of having a number of physical bodies present and able to observe and ask questions without sort of interfering with the process of treating the patient, doing it virtually actually has a lot of advantages from that perspective.
Yeah, just a side story. Back in the early days of intensely modulated radiation therapy, in which I was intimately involved, I remember delivering our first case, which was at Methodist Hospital in Houston. And in radiation oncology departments, the linear accelerator room is usually very big, but the control room is very, very small. Yeah. And we had about 25 people packed into that little room waiting to see whether this thing was going to blow up or not. And when they pressed the button and it actually worked, all of a sudden there was one person left in the room because everybody else had seen what they needed to see.
Right.
Matu, you mentioned credentialing and how your company does not believe it's in the practice of medicine. It's in the business of providing equipment for others to practice medicine. How have, for all of you, how have the hospitals that you've worked with moved in the direction of creating formal standards or requirements for credentialing? Is there some commonality that has been developed across hospitals and across types of institutions? Or is this pretty much a no man's land where everybody's moving in their own direction, doing what they want, and there's no standardization that exists? Hugo, why don't you start with that one?
Yes, I think there are two things that are interesting in what Matthew said. I fully agree. I think that's a great idea that he shared, that there's like a common part of our training that could benefit to everyone. So on the physics of focused ultrasound, et cetera. So a foundation, for example, specialized in focused ultrasound, could create a training program, a master class, you name it, that would be open to various types of physicians, whether they're neurosurgeons, whether they're urologists, whether they're gynecologists, to learn the basics of focused ultrasound, whether they want to do prostate ablation or uterine fibroids or neuro application of focused ultrasound. So I think that's a great idea. I just wanted to echo what Matthew said for later. But back to your question, I think we have some of our historical users, large academic institutions in Europe, have started to develop fellowships around minimally invasive prostate therapy, HIFU being a large part of that fellowship. And they use some of our material, but to go back to what Matthew said, they developed all the clinical and medical component of that fellowship. And I agree with Matthew, that's beyond our mission. And that's where we believe we should stop. Even if sometimes the limit is difficult to really appreciate.
Right, but so certification is something that you as manufacturers sort of control. What does the physician need to know about your equipment, about the procedure, in order for you, the manufacturer, to say that you're comfortable that they know how to use their equipment? Credentialing typically is something that is in the purview of the hospital to say, for us, you need to do 10 cases or 50 cases or 100 cases. You need to have them monitored from the outside or inside. You need to have one of our previously trained physicians in the room with you while you're doing your first cases. Oh, what kind of variability have you seen across institutions? Let's start with the US, Karen, and then see whether that's different in other portions of the world, because ideally one would want to get to, I think, a national or international standard for credentialing, which exists in certain, for instance, in the cardiovascular space. You need to do a certain number of CABGs before you're credentialed to do CABGs. So Karen, why don't you run with that one?
Yeah, thank you. I think there is quite a bit, especially right now, of variability, especially within the academic institutions. I think that was surprising for me. I would have assumed that they would have been more consistent, but they are not. I mean, it's just one credentialing department may require, just like you said, experienced physicians who have been doing this for X number of years and can show they've done X number of patients. Whereas another one may say your training program is enough and sufficient, and we're comfortable with it. All of them throughout, one thing that has been consistent is they have all required the physicians to, at a minimum, go through our training program.
Amit, you specifically with the exablate neuro, that's a technology that is not used for one indication like other prostate technologies that are on this panel. Exablate neuro can be used for neuromodulation. It can be used for cancer ablation. It can be used for different types of functional procedures in different portions of the brain. Is there different credentialing required? So for instance, if I've been credentialed at a given institution to be able to do an ablation in the substantia nigra, do I need a different certification program to be able to do one in the caudate or some other portion of the brain?
So the training program, specifically in the neuro, we have two products. We have the mid-frequency and low-frequency. We have for ablation and BBB opening. So they are relatively different programs for training. The basics are similar. But as you go, for example, for the ablation, so you have different targets. You have the VIM for essential tremor, you have the GPI for Parkinson and so on. This is very similar. Then you only need to kind of give them the highlights on the specific anatomies and what they should or should not expect during the treatment and so on. But the training itself, the basics is very similar throughout it. We have different products. We have the uterine fibroid, which is completely different. We have the prostate, which is completely different. But in terms of the neuro, those two products.
But have you seen hospitals having different credentialing requirements for using exablate neuro for the caudate or the hippocampus?
So first of all, these are all research. So in research, usually we are still there. An application specialist is still present. Right. And in general, credentials, in my experience, we don't really get from hospitals credentials. They ask us, okay, when are we certified? When can we start treating by ourselves? And if, for example, someone is leaving the hospital or a new neurosurgeon arrives and so on, they ask us to come again and give them training. So basically, it's certification and not credentialing.
Right. So let's take a poll of the four of you. Amit is suggesting that with exablate neuro, it's really certification and credentialing is just part and parcel of the process. Matu, is that the case with Tulsa Pro, or are they two separate things, one you control and the other hospital controls?
Yeah, I agree with the latter. So as Karen described, the commonality between all the different programs, at least so far that we have experience with, and again, we're a bit younger in the game here, is that they all as a minimum require that certification by the manufacturer. So we as a manufacturer say, this is our certified training program, and it's basically a requirement that any user anywhere be certified under that training program to be a user. There's a level above that where the credentialing is more hospital specific and there is a variability. Again, the ingredients are sort of the same, number of case observations, number of actual cases, etc. But that is certainly a separate layer. Now, one feeds into the other. So all the credentialing programs that I'm aware of require that certification. Right. But we provide the certification and the hospital provides the credentialing.
So Karen and Hugo, would you agree with that Matau's approach is what exists with your technologies?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
all right. So last question to the group. Given what we've covered, do you believe, and it has been mentioned, for instance, by Hugo, that the Focused Ultrasound Foundation could produce a generic training program that would prepare surgeons or other physicians to be able to use focused ultrasound? Do you believe that we can see on the horizon a time when there would be national or international standards for certification or credentialing within the field of focused ultrasound specific to given organ systems and treatments? Amit, why don't you start? And we've got about a minute and a half to go, so keep it short.
Yes.
Okay, good.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Matu.
I agree. The short answer is yes, and I would actually add to that, Mark, where so there's there's the basics, but there's also the sort of the medical components of it. I mean, in prostate, for example, the concept of focal therapy. Okay, that in our opinion, that's not up to us to necessarily fully educate the physicians on that sort of that practice of medicine. So I think that piece would be in addition to what you described.
Karen?
I agree. Yes. I mean, that is the short answer. I also agree with what Matu said.
Hugo?
Yeah, definitely a focused ultrasound certification that would be handled by the foundation, so by an independent would make sense and could be offered at large.
Great.
I think makes sense.
Well, thank you very much to the four of you, and thank you to anyone who is still on this. It's been an amazing week. My thanks to the AV company and to ShoCare for phenomenal production, and for the folks at the Focused Ultrasound Foundation for putting this together. A symposium is a tremendous amount of work when it's done live. When it's done virtual, it's an overwhelming amount of work. We have a great staff at the Focused Ultrasound. I hope you've all have enjoyed the meeting. I was here the first day to introduce. I'm here the last day to end. I thank you all for being with us and joining us, and look forward to seeing you in 2 years. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.